Senator, as a Year 12 politics student, we often talk about having an electoral mandate. If the Australian people reject the voice at the upcoming referendum, will you, as the Assistant Minister for Indigenous Australians and a member of the government, legislate the voice into existence in defiance of the decision of the Australian people?
Thank you for your question, and it's one that I do get asked at separate points across the country by media in particular, and my response is this. This is our grand final for First Nations people, our grand final between yes and no. And I have an absolute focus every single day to get as many Australians to see what we see about the Uluru Statement from the Heart, that this is the most generous request that is being put to the people of Australia. And I will continue that. I kind of look at the grand final that you had here on the weekend,
The best team won in that one.
And the NRL as well, poor Queensland, but they certainly focused on that. No one asked the Pies 2 weeks ago, what are you going to do if you lose? It's the same thing here. We stay focused firmly on wanting to reach out to every Australian until 6 p.m. on October 14.
Well, I can ask Dan Tehan, though, that question, because you are a no supporter. So what happens if there is a no vote? Does that mean your legislating of local and regional voices dies? Is that what you read from the result?
So my personal view, and I'll tell a story to sort of give you a sense as to what I think should happen. So on this coming Saturday, there's going to be 11 runners that are going to run from Parliament House to Warrnambool to raise funds and awareness for CJD, and I'm going to be one of them, because we've got parents who died of that disease. And so we're going to do it for that reason, and to make sure that hopefully we can get some funding to go into research around it, and to just raise a lot more public awareness, because ultimately in the end health is critically important. Education is also absolutely vital, and all of us, especially when we've got young children still at school, want to make sure that we're getting the best educational outcomes that we can. So what I would do is I would set up a truly bipartisan committee, and I would make sure that there were equal numbers on that committee, and I would say your job is to focus on getting better health and better educational outcomes for Indigenous people in remote and rural Australia. That's your first priority, and we want you to do it in a truly bipartisan way.
So because
what we need, Patricia, at the end of all this process is for people to come back together again and for us to get true bipartisanship again. That is what we need to see, and that to me would be the best way that we could achieve it. Now, that's my view. That's my
I've covered Aboriginal
view
affairs for 20 years, and I've watched the Parliament try to resolve issues. So you're saying equal numbers of politicians to try and resolve the issues. It's never worked before.
Why
would it work now?
Because we need bipartisanship to get the outcomes. And not only that, what we need to do is make sure that that committee travels to regional and rural and remote
Politicians
Australia.
Have travelled for years.
They do, but we've got to get them on the ground for serious periods of time in a bipartisan way. Okay. That is how you would solve. That's how you solve for this issue. And ultimately, in the end, that's how you could then begin to progress things. Without that, you just end up with this toing and froing, and that's where we need to get back to.
Wesley, would that solve it? I mean, we've watched politics. It wouldn't, would it?
No. As I said before, fund need, not race. When you create rules around race, I think that then creates, we've had some numbers thrown up that of the 800,000+ Indigenous Australians, some people believe up to 200 or 300 are not quite who they say they are. That's been out there. So I think it creates an issue.
Where's that number from?
Susan Ingram, who was on SBS.
Well, I can't fact check that. Sorry.
It can be done online, but yeah, check that. I don't believe it myself. I think the number would be lower, much lower. But it is an issue when you are creating an identity-based scheme, and it financially incentivises people, and I do have an issue with that.
Okay, Noel, just final word to you before we move on. You've long argued for needs-based responses rather than just it being linked to indigeneities. Can you just explore how you're... I'm just trying to work out...
A lot of assistance already is.
Yeah.
Aboriginal study grants are needs, means tested, like Austudy is. There's this great imagination out there that Aboriginal people just get loads and loads of welfare. We get it on the same basis as everybody else, and much of it, like the education study grants, are means tested. So the Aboriginal middle class doesn't get anything out of AB study. It's means tested like Austudy is. So I'm in full support of, when Aboriginal people do good and they rise up in the middle class, they should only access entitlements on the same basis as other Australians. It just makes sense.